Today, more people than ever are questioning God's existence.
Doubt about God's existence seems to be growing among young Americans.
It's a growing skepticism, not necessarily disbelief, but more skepticism.
I was 6, I remember going to Sunday school and kind of liking it, but kind of it left me with some unanswered questions.
Is the millennial generation giving up on God?
I don't really believe in God anymore. I used to. I was raised very religiously, but after seeing a lot of the things I've seen, I have to wonder that if there was a God, how would he let people go through that, you know?
Going to church used to be a regular part of life for Americans when they were growing up. It's a very different story today. Young people are less involved in the church than ever.
They really wanted to believe, and they really did believe for many, many years. They dedicated their lives to believing. But at some point, the evidence outweighed their beliefs.
I have had a few friends who have stopped, like who have left our church that we've been in, and they've gone and just fallen.
It's 8 a.m. service at the Word Church in Cleveland. And Antoine Steel is where you will find him every Sunday. In the sanctuary. At church, he's a greeter, a deacon in training, and involved in the parking ministry. And then there's what he used to be.
I was a party guy. You know, I loved to party. You know, I messed around with women. You know, I thought, you know, kicking it and having fun and having multiple girls was like the cool thing to do. I always got drunk and I used to smoke.
When you hear Antoine's story, clubbing every weekend, kicked out of college for selling drugs, then kicked out of a second school for bad grades, church is the last place you'd assume he'd end up. And it probably would not have been if it weren't for a spring day 2 years ago when a phone call changed everything.
April 10, 2011 was the day that I rededicated my life to Christ. I would say I was saved before then, but I actually rededicated my life to Christ. I was like really serious about it. I was in the kitchen. I was in the kitchen on my mother's phone. And my cousin had called and he started telling me this real deep spiritual story. And I was just like, what is wrong with this dude? Like, cause this is a guy like I ran with. This was somebody that we pretty much did everything together. And after he told the story, I'm like, okay, so what was the point of telling me that? He was like, Twan, I'm changing my life. And I was like, you serious?
It was far from a prank call. And it was in that serious moment Antoine made a serious change in his own life.
I just felt like it was like my last call. I felt like God was just saying, you know, listen, like it's time, like, you know, let's go. And I just felt something just come over me, and when I made that decision, I knew I was serious.
But everyone wasn't so accepting of his decision.
Then later on that night, you know, I had to call a couple of people and let them know that I didn't want to do, you know, business anymore because I couldn't be in the clubs anymore. I couldn't be promoting things that was contrary, you know, to what I believed in. So I kind of like lost some friends at that time. People were saying that I was, you know, that I was Jake, I was corny, I was lame, I was whack, I wasn't real, it was fake, I was not authentic. I mean, stuff like that. That was in the beginning, but I knew that was gonna happen, you know. I mean, people are not used to this stuff.
So I started serving at the late services, and younger people my age, they used to see me and sometimes they laugh and stuff like that, but I didn't care anymore because I knew what I was doing it for.
And as his life with God intensified, he also lost his girlfriend. Although they'd been committed to each other for 2 years, their commitment to God wasn't even. Since then, dating has become a low priority.
Because I'm celibate, and I've been celibate for 2 years.
But how? How did this former party boy turned deacon in training make this transformation? It's a question many of his peers reached out to him to find out.
How many people have contacted me through social media? It's a lot. Usually people ask, you know, well, how did you change your life, or what was it like? You know, that's like the typical question. That change is, it's not doing the things that you want you to do. It's not it's not doing things that's displeasing to God. It's not doing things that violates love.
Antoine's story is rare these days. In 2006, a significant study headed by a nonpartisan research organization called the Berger Group showed that almost half of young adults have a negative view of Christianity. And at an age where most of his peers were walking away from the Christian faith, Antoine darted toward it.
What does my generation think about Christianity? They think it's corny. They think, being saved, you can't do nothing, you can't live your life. But also they don't want to commit. They don't want to take that full responsibility as really living by the guidelines that God has set for us. I think that they don't realize that that in that obedience is so many blessings. To give up, for example, to give up sex, but the joy that you can get in replace for that is just so much more. And I think they miss that. So it's kind of like my generation just does not want to give up. What's a society say, I'm young, I'm living my life. They don't want to give that up. They want to still, hang out. They want to still do what they want to do, which I understand because that was me at one point.
There are some very powerful cultural forces at play here. And those forces are not pushing young people toward faith and toward discovering what faith is and how it connects with who they are and how it could very positively influence their lives. That cultural message is saying, reject that faith. It makes demands of you that you don't have to make.
Dr. Dobie Moser is the Executive Director of Youth and Young Adult Ministry at the Catholic Diocese of Cleveland, Ohio. For the past 5 years, he's been dedicated to solving the church's problem of losing youth.
All of the different Christian denominations are losing these young people, and we're losing them heavily between that age of 13 and 23.
Dr. Moser says that with all of the issues surrounding young people leaving the church, there's one common denominator, and it's called MTD, Moral Therapeutic Deism.
Moral Therapeutic Deism. I know it's an awkward term, MTD, but the idea of MTD is that there are certain generic faith beliefs. One of them is that there is this God that watches over you from a distance. So it's not a God engaged in any personal way in your life. It's the God out in the distance that is there when you want or need him, but otherwise leave him alone.
And MTD isn't unique to just Christianity.
This moral therapeutic deism has become a default position that is trumping all the faiths. And it has the same effect on many of them. It's basically saying faith is irrelevant and it doesn't matter.
Dr. Moser's job demands he finds ways to keep youth engaged in faith. Dr. Moser's challenge isn't just identifying why young people are deserting the Christian faith. He must also find ways to influence them to stay.
What happens if we just do same old without reflecting, without being informed, without choosing to think and act differently? My answer is we're going to fail. And we are going to have on our conscience the responsibility that says, at this time and at this place, God put us in charge to serve in particular ways to pass on this rich gift of faith, and we failed in our duty.
Research shows that half of young people that attended church in their childhood will fall away from their faith by the time they reach the college years. The problem in the church is apparent, but the solution is not as clear. What can the church do to cultivate a faith that will last into adulthood? One person unlocking the answer to this question is Darnell Wilson. Darnell is the campus pastor for Impact Ministries at Kent State University. Impact is a national organization dedicated to teaching college students about God since the 90s. Engaging the minds of this generation is a battle. But every Tuesday night at Impact, Darnell goes to war. What's he fighting for? Their souls.
Dealing with this generation, you know, who they say is one of the most unchurched generation in the history of America. Many people don't believe God. They don't believe. They doubt the historicity of the Bible or the validity of the Bible and the veracity of it. You know, they question if there is a purpose in life, you know, that's outside of themselves, you know. When you're dealing with this postmodernist society, you know, you'll believe what you can see better than what you hear.
And what Darnell wants them to see is a true image of what it's like to live life as a young Christian.
Some people have a distorted view of Christianity. They think that we're closed-minded, that we're bigoted, that we're racist, that we're ignorant, that we're uneducated, we're uninformed, unenlightened, all these different things because they've seen things on TV. And by and far, you know, that's not true. People just you know, they don't see that when you're in Christianity that there is true freedom.
But before you start thinking this is something like a boring church service, think again. The messages are tailored right to the problems they face. Hugs often go in place of hello. And then there's the one thing that's driving the organization towards success: its leader.
Darnell, I get chills when I think about his name because he's someone that's living the life, like literally living the life of Christ.
Although he's older than them, it's easy for him to relate to them because 10 years ago, he was one of them. In 2001, Darnell began his freshman year at Kent State.
My freshman year of college, I was kind of like everyone else. I wilded out. I just came and was having sex with anything that moved, you know, partying, kicking it, you know, just trying to, you know, at one point I even said to myself, I remember clear as day, I said, this is the best time of my life. I don't want any of this to ever end.
But it did end that summer when he could no longer ignore a feeling.
Like, I felt God tugging on my soul. You know what I mean? I felt he was like this, hey, you know, I've been trying to get your attention for a long time. Pay attention to me. Look at me, look at me, look at me.
Impact attracts hundreds of students to its meetings each year. But for Darnell, the fight for God is one soul at a time. When he's not working his full-time job as a registered nurse, he's meeting with Impact students.
I didn't want to link up with you, man. I ain't connected with you in a while, man. Miss your face.
Darnell cultivates faith by building bonds. And in every student meeting, he encourages students to work on what he feels is the most important relationship they can have: their relationship with Jesus Christ.
Most times, you know, for me, my job is I'm trying to debunk and take off all those jacked up thoughts people have. You know, they know church, but they don't know God.
There's no doubt Darnell's passion to share God through the relationships he builds is a strategy that has proved to be successful in bringing back the church's lost youth. And probably no one can explain this better than 20-year-old Sarah Berger, who began going to Darnell's group her freshman year. Sarah grew up in a home where Sunday mornings meant church services with her entire family.
My mom and I were so close when I was little, and she would always tell me about Jesus and who he was. And when I was 4 years old, she asked me if I wanted to accept him into my heart. And I said yes.
And I think as a mother, you think, was that real? Like, is that going to really hold? Was that really the moment that's going to change her life? But it really was.
Sarah began her freshman year at Kent State University in 2010. And as a young Christian, she naturally gravitated toward Impact. Darnell recalls meeting her.
No, one thing I noticed about Sarah is that she had an innocence, a purity almost about her love for Christ, you know, about her love for Jesus.
Sarah's newfound friend pushed her to study her faith.
Darnell made a really big difference in Sarah's life. He really did. She was totally different. I mean, she learned more about the Bible, and you could tell God became more real.
He would challenge me every day. You need to read this much of the Bible. You need to do this. You need to fast. You need to pray. My faith grew immensely.
But her faith had never been tested. Temptation came just a few months into her freshman year when she began dating an old friend from high school.
And that's kind of when everything went downhill with my relationship with Christ. I didn't have a balance at all to my life. It would be all about him. And it just became a consuming, desperate relationship.
Then Sarah did something she thought she would never do.
And so when I was 19 years old, that was the first time I had ever had sex, and it was with this kid who I'd only been dating for 2 months. And I could not believe that I gave that to him. And I started bawling. And I just thought it was so wrong, and I felt disgusting, and I felt dirty.
The relationship was taxing on Sarah spiritually and emotionally, and one day, it became physical.
Then we started driving home, and he starts asking me all these questions, starts getting mad at me, and he starts choking me in the car. And my head was below the passenger seat, and he just held it there, what seemed to be like forever, for a couple minutes, and I just couldn't breathe.
Darnell saw a change in his friend.
I saw her get kind of, get more depressed, more down. She wasn't as spry as she once was. She wasn't as happy. She didn't have a smile on her face as usual.
I felt like I was worthless. I was nothing. I looked for approval from him, and he became my priority in my life. He became where God was supposed to be in my life.
And even as she pulled away from God, Darnell was there, pushing her toward him.
I just listened to her. I prayed with her. I encouraged her, told her not to stop going, to not quit, but keep going, keep fighting.
With Darnell's guidance, Sarah ended the relationship, but she's still recovering.
I'm starting to heal from it, but it has taken a long time to do. And ever since then, slowly my relationship with Christ has just been building back up again. But through that time, I never realized until then how patient God is, and how he waits for us, and how he has said to me, I will wait for you to get out of this.
I love being around her too. So without further ado, let's give it up for our good friend and yours, Sarah Berger.
In turn, Sarah now uses her experiences through a program called Young Life, where she teaches and mentors to young high school students to help keep their relationship with God strong.
She's back to herself, but she's more seasoned.
You look at all your successes, your kids' successes, and you think, that's great, whether you're the homecoming queen or, a great athlete, and she was both those things. But I think that the proudest moment is when you look at your child and you think, you know what, I know where they're going to spend eternity, and I know who they believe in.
Sarah is one of Darnell's success stories, but she's not the first, and he's determined that she won't be the last.
Like we just had a young lady who came to our ministry this year, actually, and I just sat down with her on last Tuesday, and she said this to me. She said, Darnell, I did not care about God before. I grew up with it, but I didn't care about God. I didn't see a need for God in my life before this year. She said, but now I cannot see my life without God at all.
Statistics paint a dim picture for the future of the church, but Darnell has a brighter outlook.
And I'm seeing a generation rising up and who are going to take Christianity by the storm. And they're like this, I'm not, this is my God. He's not my mama's religion. He is my Jesus, he's my Savior, he's my Lord.
When I'm driving, I think about God. I'm thinking, how am I pleasing him? I'm always thinking different ideas, like stuff is going through my head constantly, like what I want to do, like what do I want to achieve, what do I want to start, what do I want to finish, because I feel like, like my pastor, he's preaching a sermon called Save and Pay, and I feel that, I want to be paid, and I don't want to make little money, like I'm not like thousands, I want to make millions, but it's not just because I want to do that to just have money to just flex and stun or whatever you want to call it. I want money to help people.
Since Antoine Steel made a decision to follow God, he's had one mission: bringing others to follow with him.
I said 8 tables.
And since he can't make his peers show up to church Sunday morning, he's come up with another way to share God with them. It's called Our Cookout, and today he's planning the event for the 6th year. It began as just a barbecue in Antoine's backyard in 2007, but it exploded in popularity each summer, drawing hundreds of young people from around the city looking for a good time.
So the day of the cookout, it was like 250 people back there. We had a good time, we kicked a party. It was no purpose behind it.
In 2011, his new lifestyle gave him a new reason to host the event.
People started suggesting that I should, do it and just make it, more purpose-driven, for God. And that's when we did it at Bonaventure Park, and it was like 1,500 people out there. Fox 8 came out and interviewed me. Different organizations out there. We was, educating people. People was getting saved. I gave my testimony on the stage.
I just want to let everybody know that I've changed my life. You know what I'm saying? I turned my life over to Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior, first and foremost.
That's when people start reaching out on Twitter and Facebook and stuff like that, and people was calling me.
But there's so many people out here that I talk to that, you know what I'm saying, they want to do the same thing. They've been hitting me up, Twan, how I do this, Twan, how I do that. You just got to have faith, you know what I'm saying?
Do people see me as being relatable? Absolutely. And I feel like I look like them. You know, I didn't get saved and get corny. So I think people, you know, they like the fact that I didn't lose myself in the process. Like, I'm still me.
Although that speech ended 2 years ago, Antoine's never walked off the citywide stage. The public moment propelled him into an unexpected limelight, but Antoine doesn't shy away.
Being in the limelight or being in the public eye or whatever you want to call it, the only reason I love it is because I have every opportunity to point it back to God, you know. And I mean, it says in the word, you know, be a light, you know what I'm saying? Be a light to this dark world, to this fallen world. If we're not, as Christians out here, and we're not, you know, showing the love of Christ, then who's going to do it?
Empty seats in sanctuaries across America now stand in the place where the church's youth once sat. They are a generation overcome with doubt, doubting what to believe, doubting what is real, doubting that church is the place where their questions will be answered. But perhaps it's the undoubted, the young people who are rooted in their faith. Maybe they're the ones who will quiet the questions of their peers. Perhaps it's exposing their imperfections, sharing their honesty, and showing their commitment. Perhaps that will dissolve this generation's opinion of the church and inspire them to reconnect with God. No one may ever find a definitive answer to what will save the church, but where knowledge ends, faith begins.
I am filled with hope. I believe that God has given us what we need to do what we have to do at this time and at this place and with the people that we have. I believe that God wins in the end. I just believe that in the deepest part of me.